Honestly, the only reason that anime main characters should even exist is to give rise to some of the best characters in all of fiction, the rival. Heroes, villains, anti-heroes, and really anyone who serves as an opposite to the main character. As you well know, they come in all shapes, sizes, and archetypes, and I really wanted to help you understand them by breaking these iconic goats of anime into different subgroups, and that way we can hopefully figure out together who the best anime rival is by the end of this video. So let's break down the first major category of rivals, one that I think all of you Saturday morning anime watchers will know very well. I call them villains to heroes, and a lot of the classic rivals fit that bill pretty nicely. Are you a 90s or 2000s kid? Well, then you're probably very familiar with Gary Oak and Seto Kaiba, the staple rivals of Pokemon and Yu-Gi-Oh! They're two elite prodigy characters who use their money, fame, and success to showcase just how far the rival is from the main character. Well, at least Gary does. Kaiba is kind of used as the coolest punching bag who constantly returns to flex that he should be better and is constantly pushing Yugi to doubt himself, but then relying on the pharaoh, Atem, to bail him out of sticky situations. They start out as fierce enemies in the first couple of story arcs, but as the series progressed, their popularity, coolness factor, and equal footing with the main character led to them being transitioned into a somewhat of a hero role. Villain in this context is really just used as an antagonistic force. But don't worry, there is gonna be a separate category down the line in this video that is truly villainy. However, this antagonistic force turned hero type of person is definitely one of the most popular archetypes for all the rivals, and I do think some of the most iconic rivals embody this very formula. Yoshihiro Togashi, the creator of Yu Yu Hakusho, mastered it with the character Hiei, a fan favorite to this day, and he doubled up on it in his follow-up manga Hunter x Hunter, admittedly with a little bit of a twist here in the form of Hisoka, the creepy clown guy, who loves fighting more than anything else. Gon's #1 enemy for like the longest time constantly returns to assist in weird, extra ways like the dodgeball match on Greed Island, and even transitions to a primary role after the election arc. And don't worry, I know you want me to talk about Gon's truest rival, and I will, we'll get there. Now, one of my personal favorites though in this very group is Viral from Gurren Lagann, who went from rival to true hero by the end of the series. He's a beast man, the sworn enemy of mankind, but then somehow ends up becoming the universe's sworn defender. As for some animes from the 2010s, one of the most popular examples is probably Gajeel from Fairy Tail. He truly dominates the story after his villain arc is over, becoming one of the strongest members of the main squad, surpassing even Natsu at certain points in the story. The Iron Dragon Slayer is a mighty warrior and a good lover, apparently it seems. And moving on from him, Renji Albarai from Bleach also I think fits this mold perfectly, being an early on enemy during the Soul Society arc. We do love ourselves a fighter who makes an early impact and keeps coming back for more action once the hero, is actually viewed as a hero. And also a very quick personal shout out to the GOAT of Dragon Quest Dai Hyunkul, who also makes waves in this category as a former Dark Soldier turned hero of light. Now, of course you might have realized I haven't mentioned even the villain to hero person, the one that you all thought of when I mentioned this, and a contender for the best rival in anime and manga, the Prince of all Saiyans, Vegeta. I think it's pretty rare that the love of a rival even surpasses the main character itself, but I do think that on this very list, Vegeta is one of the few characters who has a character arc that just straight up surpasses the protagonist and really made fans fall in love with the rival trope altogether. But now let's pivot to the next group and flip this archetype up a little bit and talk about the inverse situation here. Because not all rivals are villains who become heroes. In fact, many of them are originally heroes who taste the dark side and thus become a true villain by the end of the series. Meaning that the next archetype I want to talk about are the heroes turned villains type of characters. And obviously, my emo boy Sasuke here is probably the most famous example of this, and while he does eventually become a hero again, I guess at some point, I think it's pretty safe to say that many people's first experience seeing the betrayal and edgy shift to villain started with Sasuke. Being the last of the Uchiha clan, Sasuke was raised in darkness, so it's only natural that he went down a path of vengeance, very much like the other members of his clan. But he was really the character who introduced this concept to the masses, as he went from Naruto's more talented buddy to the ultimate edgelord himself. I guess it does help he also got the story split to showcase all his villainy, showing just how important the rival is in these types of stories like Naruto. Then there's a character like Vicious from Cowboy Bebop, who is framed as a villain the entire time, and we later find out that he had a good and much better relationship with the main character in retrospect only. Given that Vicious, as his name kind of suggests, was always a little bit more brutal. But his character really does take a turn after Spike abandons him, sending him alone down a life of crime and corrupt power. Now, one of my personal favorites when it comes to this specific trope is Ryo from Devilman, specifically for you modern anime watchers, Devilman Crybaby. I think he's a super unique flip on this very trope, revealing in the 11th hour that he is a villain without realizing it the entire time. Ryo shifts from Akira's good buddy to an incredible villain for some plot reasons I don't want to fully get into. But now, very much like with Vegeta, I kind of feel like if you're a serious anime fan, you probably knew that this one was gonna come and be a dominant character in this arc, because when it comes to good guys gone bad, nobody does it worse than the big bad boss of Berserk, where Griffith's role as a hero initially really only seems to basically exist to then truly make him an insanely evil villain. His acts are just beyond nefarious and things that will get me demonetized to even talk about. And ultimately, his utter betrayal of the Band of the Hawk in order to achieve his goal is what cements him in this ultimate spot. My man here throws everyone and everything under the bus for his own chance at ultimate power, which really only sweetens his complex and brutal relationship with Guts. Nearly being siblings at some point essentially make Griffith one of the best, worst, evil, and scariest rivals to ever grace the anime screen. And since we're on the topic, siblings actually kind of are a great place to shift into. Let's get into some of the best sibling rivalries in anime next. If you were someone who was up in the middle of the night around, I don't know, like 3 AM on Toonami, you might recognize one of the goats of this category, Sesshomaru from Inuyasha. This big brother yokai here always finds a convenient way to flex on and then assist his younger half-brother Inuyasha. He's all about power, defeating the strongest spirits, and is on the same quest as Inuyasha, which is why they always seem to cross paths. And as you will notice in just a moment, this is somewhat of a core theme of these sibling rivalries in general. They come from the same upbringing and usually either have the same goal as their sibling, or they pivot and take the complete opposite stance, usually being more of a villain figure at some point. And when it comes to sharing the same good goals, Yuno from Black Clover, Daida from Ranking of Kings, and even Zeldris from Seven Deadly Sins do come to mind pretty quickly here. Yuno wants to become the Wizard King, just like his foster brother Asta. Oh, by the way, of course, not all siblings are actually blood related. A lot of the time, this archetype can be bent to cover foster or found siblings as well. Shout out to Yuno for beating the Sasuke ripoff allegations by, just remaining a stand-up dude. Love that for his character. Then there is the unsung goat, Daida. This guy is Boji's younger half-brother, also desiring power and to be high up on the ranking of kings, and it leads him down a much darker path set in motion by their father. Poor kid, honestly. Good thing that he gets his head on straight eventually in the series. And then there is Zeldris, the fellow son of the Demon King, who is a villain for most of the series, but eventually pivots into being one of his older brother Melodius's greatest allies. Hell, he even ends up being the father figure of sorts for the sequel series protagonist. So talk about a major shift up here. And in this category, I also want to talk about two of my all-time favorite sibling rivalries ever in any show, but it is also kind of in the massive spoiler territory, so all I'm gonna say is go watch Kill la Kill. This show is really fire. And the same goes for 86, a phenomenal series with some wild twists that you should absolutely give a try as well. But now, as I alluded to earlier, not all siblings are good, and some of them are actually just the ultimate, villains basically. Such as the case, for example, for two absolute units, Million's Knives from Trigun and Dio Brando from JoJo's Bizarre Adventure. Million's Knives is the twin brother of Vash the Stampede in a super powerful alien with the powers to bend reality to his own will. Honestly, he is just straight up one of the coldest guys ever, and they do make him even colder somehow in Trigun Stampede. Knives is the perfect example of taking the opposite stance. He's got a very specific goal, ending humanity, casual stuff. Meanwhile, little bro here loves defending humanity. You see the conflict of interest. So, two brothers with very different philosophies, but always seem to want their brother to switch sides because at the end of the day, they do love each other still very, very much. The destroying humanity thing just a little bit inconvenient, I guess. And the same cannot actually be said for Dio Brando because this time-stopping, dog-killing, first kiss-stealing, road-rollering vampire son of a bitch is the biggest hater of all time. Being the adoptive brother of the original JoJo, Jonathan Joestar, Dio Brando goes above and beyond to rival his own brother, his brother's grandson Joseph, his great-great-grandson Jotaro. His actions somehow even ripple down to Jotaro's daughter Jolene, not to mention that Araki himself even takes this beef to alternate timelines. Basically, Dio is literally a generational villain. His rivalry goes beyond just one character, as his true rival seems to be the Joestar bloodline itself. But you know what's even better than just having a brother? A best friend. A best friend who pushes you to become the best version of yourself. This is the best friend category, who gives a new meaning to the phrase, "you've got a friend in me." And as you know, some rivals in this category are total powerhouses from the get-go who continue to grow and play incredible pivotal roles in the story. Some people that come to mind here are Grey Fullbuster from Fairy Tail, Karma from Assassination Classroom, or Arthur from Fire Force. They can kind of sometimes go off and do their own quests, right? Or, are highlighted when helping the main character really take things up a notch. They don't always get the full spotlight, but they definitely thrive whenever they do. Then there's also what I guess we could call true best friends, people who happily would just throw their own lives on the line for their best pals. Characters like Killua from Hunter x Hunter, Ban from Seven Deadly Sins, and the most memorable man on the planet, Joey Wheeler from Yu-Gi-Oh! Killua here is of course the golden child of Hunter x Hunter who's ready to toss away his family and his own life for Gon's sake altogether. Ban walked through literal hell for decades, nearly losing his mind just to help Melodias on the other side. And Joey Wheeler damn near is the main character of the Battle City arc altogether and one of Yugi Boy's biggest hype men. These are side characters who actually end up taking on main character tendencies themselves, getting major battles, side arcs, and even sections of the main story dedicated to just them. And all of them end up moving from rival to an almost secondary protagonist position, but they have their own goals as well. They still want to grow and they don't settle for being second fiddle. Usually they have a pretty healthy, growing relationship with their rival, showing that spite sometimes isn't really the answer. And funnily enough, I actually think that some of the best rival characters are the ones who blend these two roles. Best friends who have a little bit of an edge to them too, right? They show up when it matters, but dominate the spotlight when the author lets them. These are your Black Stars from Soul Eater, Bakugo and Todoroki from My Hero Academia, and a modern favorite of mine, Lance Crown from Mashle. I'd argue that these characters all slightly outdo the main character on average, but the plot armor reduces them to the second fiddle spot anyways. For them, being a friend comes second to being a rival, and that's the healthiest way to balance things in my opinion too. Now, I'm gonna get a little bit more nuanced here with this video because ultimately this next category and the best pals category we just talked about do have some decent amount of overlap, but you will see why I decided to separate them anyways. Because the next archetype might be my personal favorite of all these, since all these characters exceed the main character himself, pushing them to grow as a nearly unachievable goal. They are what I would call the just out of reach type of rivals. And right off the top, sports anime just crush this character. Two absolute pillars here are Itoshirin from Blue Lock and Kageyama from Haikyuu. They are, in a way, objectively better and stronger characters than their respective protagonists, serving as their direct inspiration. Rin, for most of the time, is above Isagi, and without Kageyama, Hinata is pretty much useless for most of the series. But these rivalries also can be good or bad, as some anti-hero or gray area characters do fill this spot as well. Hyuga and Kai from Beyblade are incredibly difficult hurdles for the bladers who step to them, and Big Daddy Yujiro Hanma is like the ultimate rival for Baki. Father and son, I think, is a pretty great rivalry category on its own that should be explored in anime a lot more often, I think. And then of course, let's not forget about those love interest rivals, people who are better, faster, stronger, and are also trying to steal your girl. Damn. Right now, the king of this category is Gigi from Dandadan, since Evil Eye makes him an unbelievably powerful fighter, or hey, sometimes they aren't Mr. Steal Your Girl, they are just the girl in the form of Mina Ashiro from Kaiju number 8. Her maximum Kaiju slaying power makes her basically an unachievable level for Kafka, as she realized their shared dream when Kafka never could. Death the Kid is arguably one of the best in this entire role, being the child of Death himself. He's a disgustingly powerful nepotism rival for Maka, and debatably the best weaponmeister by the end of the series. Also, come on, he just looks sick as hell, so there is some bonus points in this category too, I think. Alright, but now let's shift into a category I know tons of you are actually waiting for: the villainous equals archetype. That's right. From the get-go, sometimes the rivals are just straight up evil. There's no arc that turns them evil, they aren't corrupted over the course of the series, just from day one in the series, they are bad guys. Who knows, maybe in their past they were good or a little good, but not as far as the hero is concerned. Mahito from JJK, he is the combined evil of all of humanity in cursed spirit form. And for some reason, I guess he has a very hard-on for pissing Itadori Yuji off, which, well, doesn't go too well for him, you know? But the same goes for Akaza from Demon Slayer. The only character on this list who's truly conquered the real-life box office, by the way. Akaza dropped Rengoku, and in doing so, cemented his defeat at the hands of Tanjiro Kamado. No Channing Tatum backstory can redeem you, robbing us of the GOAT Rengoku Akaza. I am sorry. But it's pretty crazy, sometimes the most demonic characters are just actual humans. Like Anderson from Hellsing and Johann Liebert from Monster. They are just truly evil people, broken and disgusting for just the sake of it. And they do serve as these perfect foils to Alucard and Dr. Tenma, people who indirectly created the monsters that rival them to begin with. Reiner from Attack on Titan also kind of slips in this category as one of the most iconic betrayals and reveals in anime history, but he kind of almost gets a redemption arc a little bit. Maybe? I mean, AOT's ending is kind of whack all over the place and doesn't paint anyone in a really good light, to be honest, so let's move on from that. Speaking of light though, the clearest example of a villainous rival is the man who consumes light, the darkness fruit wielding Yonko of One Piece, Marshall D. Teach, aka Blackbeard. He is just the perfect rival to Luffy, bringing all the negative bad vibes across the Grand Line. Now, I'm a little bit biased as a One Piece creator at heart, but Teach really crushes this two sides of the same coin style of rivalry, because he's just the perfect foil for Luffy and is framed as one before we even knew he was a big villain, with the legendary cherry pie scene right here. Though I do realize I do need to pivot here and quickly acknowledge another rival type, because sometimes the rival is just the good guy instead. When villains are the main characters or the hero is misinformed, the rival is actually in the right. L from Death Note is the very good guy detective hunting the serial killer Kira. In a way, he is the true hero of the story. Then there is Scar from Fullmetal Alchemist, who just is correct in terms of his motives. He's fighting oppression and is our introduction in the story that the main army is actually the bad guy. And we love that. This world needs way more Scar energy. So the real question now is, who does take the cake? Well, I think it really just depends on what type of rival you absolutely love, but for me, I think it's very hard to deny that Dio Brando, Vegeta, and Johann Liebert are just perfect examples of rivals across all their archetypes. And there are of course a bunch of other really fun rivalries we haven't even talked about, like Legoshi and Lewis from Beastars, there's, Shokugeki no Soma, a bunch of other really like Samurai Champloo, right? Obviously, I don't have enough time to talk about all the best rivals in anime, so please let me know your favorites in the comments below. I will check them all out, and if you want to see something that unites many of the rivals, their insane powers, check out this video where I break down the best special eyes in anime and manga of all time, since we do know that iconic rivals like Sasuke do like flexing their special eyes better than the main character ever could, and I will see you in that next video.